In 1285, King Edward I of England passed a law requiring that all trees and shrubs be cleared 200 feet on either side of any major road in the kingdom. This was not landscaping. It was because bandits were using the vegetation to ambush travelers, and the crown was so thoroughly exhausted by the relentless robbery that it made clearing the roadside verge a legal obligation of the landowners on either side. Think about that for a moment. The medieval state did not attempt to arrest the thieves. It attempted to remove the trees where they hid. That was considered the more practical solution. End quote. End quote. That was the reality of the road. In the year 1200, you need to travel. Maybe it is a pilgrimage. Maybe it is business. Maybe it is an order that cannot be refused. Whatever the reason you are going, and everything you instinctively believe about what it means to move from one place to another is about to be taken apart piece by piece. There is no road in any sense you would recognize. What passes for a road is a strip of earth where other people walked before you, and where, with luck, other people will walk after you. In dry summer, it is dust that rises to your knees. In every other season, and in England, the year has many other seasons. It is mud, not symbolic mud, not inconvenient mud. Mud that swallows animals whole. Mud that dismantles carts. Mud that pulled travelers sideways into adjacent bogs and left them there until spring, or until never. The Roman roads exist, technically, some sections of them, but with almost 1,000 years of neglect since the empire collapsed, what remains are raised ridges in the terrain, sunken stones, and the memory that something straight once ran through here. Local people use these ridges as reference points, but walking on them is frequently more dangerous than walking around them, because the loose, subsided stones twist the ankles of horses and humans with equal enthusiasm. Roman infrastructure was not maintained. It was looted, forgotten, and gradually absorbed back into the earth. What survives is not a road. It is the ghost of a road. To understand medieval travel, we first need to understand who actually travels. The honest answer is almost no one. The overwhelming majority of people alive in this century will die within 30 kilometers of where they were born. For the peasant bound to his lord's land under feudal obligation, the concept of travel is as abstract as flight. He goes to the nearest market town. He attends the annual fair, if one exists nearby. He walks to church every week. That is the full geography of his existence. His world has a radius measured in hours on foot, and within that radius, he knows every stone, every face, every dog's bark by name. So who does travel? Merchants, with their goods lashed onto mules or dragged in heavy carts. Pilgrims, with their staffs and their prayers, moving toward relics and indulgences, and the faint hope of miraculous healing. Royal messengers, who technically have priority access to horse relay posts and are still entirely exposed to everything the road throws at them. Soldiers in transit, who are a danger to everyone around them just as much as to any declared enemy. Clergy fulfilling ecclesiastical orders, itinerant judges riding the circuit of the courts. And the poor, the displaced, the expelled, the fleeing, the people who have no choice but to walk, because stopping means dying of hunger in one place instead of dying of hunger while moving. For each of these groups, the road means something different. For all of them, it means danger. The day begins before dawn, when you travel, not out of spiritual discipline, but out of pure necessity. You want to cover ground while there is light. In summer, that gives you perhaps 15 usable hours. In winter, fewer than 8. And the speed you can maintain on foot, which is how most people travel, is roughly 30 kilometers per day in reasonable conditions. Reasonable conditions are uncommon. Horses on bad roads are not dramatically faster than humans walking, because you cannot gallop over a surface riddled with holes and deep mud without risking a broken leg for your animal, which would put you in a considerably worse position than before. The smell of a medieval road is something no historical document fully captures, but we can reconstruct it. Horse dung, mule dung, ox dung, in constant and generous supply. The smoke of campfires burning at the road's edge, the sharp bite of wet leather in rain, and it rains, frequently, relentlessly, particularly in this part of the world. People who do not bathe regularly because hot water costs money, and privacy is a concept that does not exist at this scale. Carrion animals that die on the road are nobody's problem, and therefore everybody's problem, meaning they stay exactly where they fall until they dissolve. And underneath all of it, the smell of turned earth, of churned mud, of vegetation rotting in the drainage ditches that line the better maintained stretches of road. The sounds are their own archive, the constant grinding of wooden wheels, iron horseshoes ringing on stone where stone exists, which is rarely, the crack of whips, muttered prayers, children crying in slow-moving carts. And occasionally, in the distance, nothing at all, the specific silence of a dense forest that makes you tighten your grip on the knife you carry and sweep your eyes both ways along the path ahead. You carry a knife. Everyone carries a knife. Not carrying a knife on a medieval road in 1200 is the equivalent of abandoning every instinct for self-preservation simultaneously. The knife is for animals, for food, for work, and for the robber who may be waiting around the next bend in the road. If you have money enough, you carry a staff as well. If you have more money still, you travel in a group. Groups are the only meaningful protection the road offers. The logic is simple and pitiless. Bandits attack easy targets, and a group of 10 people carrying staffs and knives is less easy than one person alone. This is why medieval pilgrimages are social events as much as religious ones. You do not walk to Canterbury alone if you can help it. You gather with other pilgrims in the nearest town, and you depart together, and the group's practical function is to make an attack less attractive. Chaucer will understand this 2 centuries later when he writes the Canterbury Tales. That collection of pilgrims riding together is not just literary convenience. It is precise sociological observation of how travel actually worked. The bandits. We should talk about the bandits, because they are not what the romanticism of later centuries will make them. They are not noble-hearted Robin Hoods redistributing wealth with a wink. They are, in the main, desperate men, discharged soldiers with no war left to fight, peasants evicted from their land, men running from debt or from crimes committed elsewhere, people who arrived at a point where the risk of hanging outweighed the certainty of starving through another winter. The forest they emerge from is not an enchanted forest. It is a cold, wet, wolf-inhabited forest, and it is the only alternative they found to dying in a different way. What they do is straightforward. They watch the road. They wait for a vulnerable target, a lone merchant, an elderly pilgrim, a family with a cart. They come out of the undergrowth in sufficient numbers to prevent resistance. They take everything worth taking. If the target resists, they kill them, because living witnesses are operationally inconvenient. If the target surrenders peacefully, they may be left alive, but there is no guarantee. Medieval records are full of encounters with these forest men that ended in death, mutilation, or the complete disappearance of travelers. The roads are crime scenes that no one has the police force to monitor. The police force, for that matter, does not exist as a concept. There is the sheriff, a royal official responsible for a county, but one man and his assistants cannot patrol hundreds of kilometers of road. There is the hue and cry, the legal obligation of all free men to shout and pursue any criminal caught in the act, theoretically transforming every community into an improvised enforcement body. It works sometimes in villages with strong communal identity where the crime happens in front of witnesses. It does not work in uninhabited forest where the crime leaves no one alive to shout. When you reach a village at dusk, and you must reach a village at dusk, because sleeping in the open in 1200 is an invitation to wolves, thieves, and hypothermia in any month outside of high summer, you look for an inn. What you will find, at best, is a house whose owner decided to scatter hay on the floor, hang a branch of greenery above the door to indicate that drink is available inside, and charge you for the privilege of sleeping on that floor beside strangers and livestock. The medieval hospitality system is so decentralized and inconsistent that traveling without local contacts or letters of introduction is genuinely reckless. Monasteries offer lodging to pilgrims. It is a religious obligation, and generally the best option available, with food that is at least warm and some measure of security within walls. But monasteries are not everywhere, and you cannot perfectly calibrate your daily pace to always arrive near one before dark. The commercial inn exists, but its keeper has no legal obligation to you beyond not robbing you actively, and even that obligation is loosely defined and loosely enforced. You share the space with other travelers you do not know. Your possessions sleep with you, beneath you if at all possible, because rolling over in the morning to find your pack emptied is common enough to have generated proverbs about it. The bed, when there is a bed, is a shared straw mattress. Fleas and lice are constants, but that is not specific to inns. That is specific to being alive in the 13th century. Food on the road is what you carry, or what you can purchase. Hard bread that keeps for days, smoked cheese, salted meat for those with sufficient means, dried fruit. In inns and village markets, there may be hot pottage, which is mostly hot water with whatever was available: cabbage, turnip, a piece of bone if fortune smiles. The flavor is salt and wood smoke and animal fat when fat exists. The texture is thick and gray. The goal is not pleasure. The goal is enough calories to keep walking tomorrow. Water is a constant problem. Rivers and streams run beside many roads. Because roads naturally follow watercourses, it makes geographic and historical sense. But drinking from a river carries the constant risk of intestinal illness that will not kill you suddenly or dramatically, but gradually, dehydrating you while you still attempt to walk toward your destination. Weak ale and diluted wine are safer than unboiled water, which is why they are universal drinks at every level of medieval society, not for intoxication, but for basic sanitation. Low alcohol kills a portion of what would otherwise kill you. The medieval peasant is not drinking all day because he enjoys it. He is drinking all day because the alternative is dysentery. Navigation deserves specific attention because it is fundamentally unlike anything the modern world experiences. Accurate maps do not exist for common travelers. The maps that do exist are scholarly objects, monastic works that represent the world in theological as much as geographic terms. Jerusalem at the center, the edges of the world populated by dog-headed men and dragons. They are not useful for deciding whether to turn left or right at the next crossroads. You navigate by landmarks, by the church tower visible on the horizon, by the stream that must be forded after the oak forest, by the hill with the distinctive double summit that everyone in the region knows, by verbal directions collected from locals who know the route. And here the problem is that every person you ask gives you a different answer based on the landmarks they themselves use, which may not be landmarks you will recognize when you encounter them. Getting lost was common. Getting lost in dense forest was the kind of lost that could kill you, not dramatically, not with any narrative satisfaction. You simply walked in widening circles until you collapsed from exhaustion or were found by someone whose intentions you could not verify. Medieval forests are large, dense, and deeply disorienting. The sun helps when it is visible. When it is hidden behind cloud cover, which is frequent at this latitude, you have the moss on tree trunks and your own intuition, and neither is reliable enough to stake your life on comfortably. Bridges deserve a moment. They are simultaneously the most remarkable and most predatory features of the medieval road system. A bridge over any river of meaningful size is a costly engineering feat, maintained by tolls extracted from everyone who crosses. The ferries that substitute for bridges where none exist are expensive, slow, dangerous in high water, and operated by men who charge whatever the desperation of the situation will support. The ford crossings, simply walking through where the river runs shallow, are viable in dry weather and suicidal after rain. In the winter flooding that arrives reliably every year, entire regions become literally impassable for weeks. Roads become shallow rivers, fields become lakes. The few existing bridges are subjected to water pressure that frequently destroys them. Historians estimate that certain English routes were functional for less than half the calendar year, and even during the nominally good months, they depended on local weather conditions that no one could predict beyond a few days. This has direct and brutal consequences for trade, for communication, for royal administration. A medieval kingdom cannot be governed efficiently because information moves at the speed of a horse over a bad road. A message from London to York, 300 kilometers, takes 4 or 5 days under ideal conditions, with a well-mounted messenger and working relay posts. In winter, it takes 2 or 3 weeks. Sometimes it does not arrive at all. This is why local authority holds so much power. The king is a distant abstraction. The local lord, the county sheriff, the abbot of the nearby monastery, these are the immediate and real power. A road cut off by flooding is not a logistical inconvenience. It is the total isolation of a community from the rest of the known world for an indeterminate stretch of time. Within that isolation, the stranger who appears at the village gate is not greeted with instinctive generosity. He is greeted with deep and justified suspicion. In an age without identification documents, without any formal system for verifying who a person claims to be, the unknown figure on the road represents unquantifiable threat. He might be a legitimate merchant. He might be a spy for a rival lord. He might be a criminal fleeing another jurisdiction where his face is known. He might be carrying disease. He might be a religious agitator. The hospitality owed to strangers exists as a Christian duty, preached from pulpits and practiced with varying degrees of actual enthusiasm. But suspicion exists alongside it, and it is equally rational. Villages that shelter a criminal are held legally accountable for that criminal's subsequent actions. Opening your door to the stranger on the road is a real wager on his character, and you have no way to verify the odds before placing it. All of it together, the broken roads, the forest bandits, the toll-taking bridges, the untrustworthy inns, the locals, watching with narrowed eyes, creates a culture of travel that is simultaneously brave and desperate in equal measure. The people who travel know exactly what they are walking into. They go anyway because the alternative is worse. The pilgrim who walks 300 kilometers to a shrine with an inflamed knee and feet stripped raw with blisters is not being irrational. He is making the calculation that makes complete sense within his world. The possibility of miracle, of indulgence, of a sacred encounter that transforms physical suffering into something with meaning that extends past the body. The merchant who departs knowing that roughly 1 in 10 of his professional peers does not return from the long-distance routes is not being reckless. He is being economic. The potential profit exceeds the calculated risk when you lay both on the same scale. And the poor traveler who simply walks, without fixed destination, without money for an inn, without organized enough faith to call it a pilgrimage, is following movement as the only survival strategy still available to him. He walks because in the next village there might be work. He walks because staying means dying more slowly. He walks until he cannot, and then he stops. And what happens after that rarely makes it into the historical record, because the historical record does not note where the poor fall. What survives centuries later is the physical trace. Archaeologists working the margins of former medieval routes find objects dropped or abandoned split coins, leather buckles, religious amulets, the bones of animals slaughtered for a meal on the road. At some significant crossroads, they find improvised cemeteries. Travelers who did not reach their destination, buried quickly by whoever found them, with no name cut into stone because there was no stone available and no one knew the name anyway. Those nameless graves along the road's edge are the most honest archive we have of what travel meant. Not the maps with their dragons and their Jerusalem at the center. Not the chronicles recording the journeys of kings and saints. The anonymous dead in the margins of the path people who tried to get from one place to another and did not manage it, whose names we will never know, whose destinations were never reached. There is a stretch of road somewhere in the English countryside where, if you look at the right angle in the right light, you can still see the depression in the earth, the hollow worn down by centuries of feet, before the root was abandoned and the grass grew back over it. It does not look like much. It looks like a shallow fold in the ground, a wrinkle in the field. But someone died within sight of that hollow. Several someones. They were walking somewhere that mattered to them enough to risk everything the road required, and the road took the risk back. The hollow does not mark it. There is no marker. There is just the grass and the shape of the earth underneath, and the question of where exactly they thought they were going.